Welcome, everybody, to Freelance Writing Direct. I'm your host, Estelle Erasmus, the author of Writing That Gets Noticed, Find Your Voice, Become a Better Storyteller, Get Published, which was named by Poets and Writers a best book for writers. Every week, I speak with novelists, with authors, with writers of every niche to talk about their tips, their tricks, their strategies, and how the sauce is made, including creative advice. I'll talk about essays and articles and share my own experience in 3 decades of publishing. So join me every week and grow your business and build your craft with Freelance Writing Direct. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. And follow along on Substack, where I share special clips for subscribers only at estelleserasmus.substack.com. Hi, I'm Estelle Erasmus, writer, NYU professor, and host of Freelance Writing Direct. I'm so excited to share that I recently gave a TEDx talk called How to Get Noticed in Your Writing and Beyond, where I share the hard-won lessons I've taught at NYU and learned as editor-in-chief of multiple national magazines about how to make your message stand out no matter the medium. But I also get personal in my talk. I open with a funny story from my past involving Thomas the Tank Engine, one that proves it's not about saying more, but about saying what matters. And I reveal a vulnerable chapter of my life that taught me just how powerful it is to be truly heard. You can watch it on YouTube. There's a link in the show notes. And you can also look up Estelle Erasmus on YouTube. If it resonates, I'd love for you to leave a comment on the TED site. It means so much to me to hear the messages that stick with you from my talk. Thank you. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Freelance Writing Direct. I'm your host, Estelle Erasmus, and I'm so happy to have Lanier Isom with us today. She's an author and journalist living in Birmingham, Alabama. She wrote Grace and Grit, the life story of Alabama native and fair pay advocate Lilly Ledbetter. The film Lilly, based on the book, was released in select theaters this May. Her work has been featured in Al Jazeera, LA Times, Huffington Post, Salvation South, and The Bitter Southerner. She's also a frequent contributor to Inside Climate News. She recently finished a memoir and a book proposal based on a long-form article and continues to write about social justice, the South, dogs, psychics, and anything that keeps her awake at night. Welcome, Lanier.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
So tell me a little bit about how you first learned about my coaching episodes and reached out to me. I think it might have been on Instagram.
I listened to your podcast, and then I started a Substack, and I wrote a piece on that which referenced your book. So when I posted that, I tagged people, but I had no idea that you would actually respond. So I was so excited.
That's great. No, I really appreciated you tagging my book and saying that you enjoyed the podcast. And I think you had talked about some things you were dealing with. And I said,
Right.
hey, if you're interested in being a guest, that would be great. So why don't you say a little bit about what your dilemma is?
I think my superpower is I can write on a lot of different topics in different genres. Like I can write about data centers for Inside Climate News, but I also have an essay about Southern psychics coming out. So that is what I love about writing. And I think the different types of pieces play into each other, and that's very positive, but it also means I get distracted and I struggle with time management and I don't finish things as fast as I would like. And I have a lot of projects that I put a lot of time interviewing, research into that either haven't landed or I haven't finished. for a variety of reasons. I think as a writer, especially someone my age, I'm 59, you have different seasons of your life, and parenting or elder care or things can take you away from the work that you really have no choice but to address.
So, absolutely. I mean, I'm somebody also who considers myself multifaceted. I'm writing, I'm editing, I'm teaching, I'm doing my Substack, I'm doing the podcast. And it's tough because you have to figure out what your main priorities of the day are. This is what's worked for me and what's worked for my students. I would dedicate certain days to certain things because our brains are not great at multitasking. So Monday will be your day to work on the memoir. That's always going to be your day. And you're not going to
Okay.
schedule appointments on Monday. It's like going to be your main writing day. And
Okay.
then maybe for your pitches, you're going to keep notes to yourself of what you want to pitch. And then Tuesday morning from 10 to 12 is going to be your day. You're going to go into your drafts, into your notes. I do everything on the Notes app in my computer, in my phone. And then when I want to go back and search when it's time, I
Mhm.
do that and then pull that in. And so now your brain will be like, now I have the pitching time. Now I have the this time. And you won't be like pitching book, like everything throwing at yourself. The other thing I do, and you might find this useful,
Okay.
if we're people who are, and you're a journalist, as we're always trying to do stuff, I do a record keeping for myself. Every time I do, I go like, sent email to Lanier and I'll
Okay.
like write it down. Or, sent idea for this to editor and I'll write it down. And so I can go back to any given date and see what I did on that date. So it could make me feel productive. It could make me remember some of the steps. It's just a helpful thing. The other thing you
Great.
should do is celebrate your successes, whatever the little ones are. Like keep a record on Facebook or like even when I have a little win, I try not to be a big poster about actual things happening. So I didn't talk about my TEDx talk until I actually had it, and then I talked about it. But when you have something, just give little posts about it because again, that's a record of where you've been and where you've come from. And it just keeps motivating you, especially, and I really understand this, Lanier, like somebody doing so many things, fingers and so many toes, because it can get absolutely intimidating and overwhelming. I get it.
Absolutely. Well, I like the idea of designating days because what I've tried to do is designate hours or chunks of the day to the different silos or the different tasks. Because as you know, there's the generating the actual work, but there's interviewing and research and pitching and follow up. So they're all so different. So I like designating days to different tasks and knowing that, for instance, I have an article I'm working on about biodiversity in Alabama. And these environmental pieces are interesting because I learned so much. And they're such big topics.
Yes.
So, it's okay if it's going to take me X number of days. I just need to focus on that, finish it, and then move on to
Yes, that's your deep dive day. You're
right.
going to
Yes.
dive into a subject. I always say, like, I become an expert on a subject, and then if I'm
Right.
not going to write about it again, it like all goes out of the brain. It's like a sieve,
So
but
tough.
also it's a funnel to take
Yes.
it in, and then you
Yes.
pull it together. So we kind of address some steps you could take and report back on what's working. That'd be great. Okay, and you had a question about platform. Let's talk about that.
Yes, let's talk about that elusive concept in Word that is thrown about by every agent and everyone you hear and talk to, platform. So, first of all, I don't even know who my audience is. So, I don't know how to define that because I have such a wide range of things I talk about that some people resonate with, some people don't. It just depends.
I know exactly what you're saying. I mean, you have a huge body of work. I mean, I went to your website, Lanier, and you have 5 pages of clips standing, and I'm sure that's not even all the clips. You just use your top, which is what we do. And you covered things from Alabamians want answers about a 4 million square foot data center coming to their backyards and Mobile Bay, the oyster tail of woe, Then you talked about that your piece that did very well about looking for pot from HuffPost, which I love HuffPost. Did you work with Noah or Emily?
Yes, Noah was fabulous.
Noah's wonderful, and I have an episode on the podcast with Noah, and he's
I
just
know, I listened to it. I think that's why I pitched him.
oh, I love that. And he gave me the blurb for the front of my book.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's great.
Oh, that's wonderful. So here's the thing. I was looking at some of your pieces and strong reporting, diving deep into specific subjects. And I think you do a lot of what I call localized reporting. It's very focused on a subject near home or in your area. Unless it's like up for a Pulitzer, that's not the type of thing that's going to build a platform. It's going to get you regular bread and butter work. It's going to get you known in your community. What I really was pulled by was when I saw your voice in pieces, and that was the HuffPost piece. There's another piece you wrote that pulled in your voice where you talked about alcoholism in your family. And so I thought, okay, so she needs to somehow, in her reported pieces, get her voice in. And I do talk about that in my book, about pulling a bit of your voice into it, because that's what captivates. And that's why that piece did very well. The one that you did for HuffPost, my husband and I went looking for pot. It quickly turned into a nightmare. And you have a very distinctive voice also. So I feel like if you can somehow start putting it in some of these localized reporting pieces and also get other pieces where you can really run with your voice and
Right.
your stories, that's what's going to be the platform builder.
Well, Estelle, so one thing I started recently is a Substack, and that is where I am able to write in my voice. And I've had positive reactions to the various things I've posted, and it's been really a wonderful experience because of precisely what you just said. I'm able to sit down and just write as Lanier.
So what you have is rare because, there are a lot of journalists and they're dry. I'm a journalist and I have voice, and that's what's helped me build my platform throughout my 3-decade career. But you can still build your platform, but you have to have your voice because otherwise it's very amorphous. It's like people will pull in the pieces of information that you're sharing in the reported story and then they move on. With your voice, they're getting invested in who you are and your stories. So Substack is good. I love Substack. I have Substack. I think it's good. I think you have to be careful not to put your stories that are publishable, that you want to be in a publication or a book, in your Substack, because that makes it not publishable by a publisher or an editor because they are looking at that. So if you can put your voice in other ways, but then you have another challenge. You need to connect it to the material that you want to work on and publish on without giving away the stories. And I love that you did the Emily Ledbetter book because I used to be on the board of an organization called Mothers and More, which really focused on the work that Emily Ledbetter had done to allow women to use their names to get accounts, bank accounts. It was that early work. That's a very cool connection.
So I have a finished memoir that I wrote. I need to publish it. And it took me 7 years. I've been through many drafts, had some outside eyes on it. So it's done. And it is about my life. It's about growing up in Birmingham, Alabama in the 70s and 80s. It's about exposing and a lifelong search for justice concerning my high school track coach who was a predator. But it's also a story about family and place and home and coming back to Birmingham after college and, redeeming our family name and living in the house where I grew up and my mother grew up, raising my family. So it's a braided narrative about redeeming the past. And the narrative about the school and the coach ends with statute of limitation reform for child sex abuse in Alabama.
So for your memoir, you definitely need to build up pieces with your voice because nobody knows your voice. And if they're seeing your voice the first time in the memoir and there's nothing else that's been
Right.
published, there's a disconnect. You know, you're a reporter, I mean, your voice was in the HuffPost piece. So you need more of those kind of situations.
Okay.
And yes, you use your voice in the Substack, but you need to connect it then to certain elements, like whatever you could, maybe you can take a news item that you're not going to write about, and then you can reference your own situation to it in the Substack and start, building your following that way, but you're not without giving away everything that's going to be in the memoir. So it won't be a surprise if somebody's reading you, they'll be like, oh, I see that she's talking about this and the other, because it's like the two separate sides of you right now.
Exactly.
I would also see, I know not all places wanted for the localized reporting, if you could get more of your voice in there, because you have a good voice. And maybe you can start with, something that happened to you, right? Something that happened. And then it's connected to you, not just your reporting, right? So it's you. And maybe circle back. I talk in my book and my TEDx talk about circling back something at the end that you pulled from the beginning. And maybe you can circle back and use your own kind of imprimatur at the end and say something like a final thought or something. And you're getting your wit in there, your Southern style in there, something. As my poor alcoholic, I'm making this up, as my poor alcoholic granddaddy used to say, it's blah, 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 blah. So you start getting your little Lanier Isoms going.
There you go. I like that. Hey, we'll go with that. I'm going to make a list of them.
Yes, exactly. And that'll bring your personality more into your work. Yeah, I think that's one thing. Okay, so that is that. And then the other thing was you were interested in publishing a domestic violence related story. So tell me about that.
Okay, so in 2019, a woman here in Birmingham was murdered by her ex-cop husband, and he left her body at a suburban high school, actually where my daughter attended, in the parking lot there. So it was a big story. And I do, like I always do, if something catches my attention and I care about it, I write about it. So I did an editorial about Megan Montgomery, and it went viral. You can't predict these things. I've been writing editorials forever. So I realized how little I knew about domestic violence. And it was right before COVID. So I started learning about domestic violence, talking to folks in the community. And then during COVID, I interviewed Megan's family to write a book about her. But I envisioned the book as a memoir, as a straight story about Megan and the pitfalls she experienced trying to find a way out would illustrate the issues with domestic violence. But the family really didn't like that approach. They wanted a more issue oriented with maybe an anecdote here or there, which I respect. And I'm certainly not going to be anyone to bring any more controversy, pain on any family. So I rewrote the book proposal, but I lost my passion for it because it felt like a school report. It felt like an academic endeavor. I like to tell stories about people and places and then weave in, the issues, of course.
So if you interview them, do they have to give the life rights to her story to you, or how did that?
No, no.
Okay.
I mean, I could go forward with it, but that's just not who I am.
So when people are reading about, sad things, tragic things that happen to other people,
right?
It's very hard to write as a memoir if you don't even know the person and you reported on the person. And it's like, it's not a memoir. It'd be like, more like an autobiography of her life.
But it was Megan and her life and all the things that happened, good, bad, and ugly.
Right.
And complicated.
So it would need to be a little bit more than just her thoughts, her musings, because yes, her story took national prominence, but it's almost like I would address how other books were done, how some of those books were addressed, because I think
Okay.
there has to be really compelling stories. I'm not sure the family is the best person to like tell
Sure.
those stories. So that's like a tough one,
I
especially
know.
because of the involvement of the family and how you feel you have a responsibility probably to handle it in a certain way for
Right.
them.
But
Yeah.
I also know and believe, one, that the issue of officer involved violence is underreported, is not explored. And I know how important this topic is. So
Yeah.
it's just a matter of knowing what to do with the material now.
Maybe you should get involved with or collaborate with an organization or an association
Yeah.
that can then share ancillary stories and it could build it
Right.
out a little bit
Yeah.
more. And
Yeah.
also with their expertise and collaboration, it would give it a bit more gravitas
Yeah.
to actually get published.
And I did actually interview other women who were married to police officers, and I had that in there, or at least one woman's story. But you're right, I could broaden this with other stories. There's a way to do it. The material's there. I just have to reframe it.
Yeah. And the other benefit of getting an organization or association involved to the subject matter that you're covering is that they will help with the promotion when it does come out. You know, they'll tell the membership who is your audience. So
Yeah.
that's the reader. They're going to be interested. Either they went through it or they're, escaped it,
Yeah.
obviously, or they're dealing with it now. So I think that's a natural audience. And there's a lot that you can do. You could partner to speak together,
Right.
other organizations about it. It's more gravitas. It's not just the sensationalism of the
Do
story that
you
happened.
So there's a wonderful organization here called One Place, but it's local. Should this organization be national?
Yes, I do believe
Okay.
it should be national. You
Gotcha.
can start with the national organization, and once you have the national organization, you could certainly bring local ones in
Okay.
to support. They may or may not be in the book, depending what they
Yeah.
can contribute, but
Right.
a national one is going to give you the greatest elevation for your project.
Okay. All right. Perfect.
So I think we talked about three of your dilemmas.
Yes. I appreciate your insight. It is all very helpful to hash out ideas with someone because it can be very isolating as a writer and you can get stuck in your head going around and around and totally lose any perspective.
Absolutely. And you have the breadth and depth of experience. You're a well-published journalist. And I think, really push your creative muscles, stretch your creative muscles to
Okay.
write more voicey pieces and get them published in big publications. Like HuffPost has 60 million readers. That I'm sure was a huge boon when you got in there because people could see your voice. I would go through the list of the current, publications, try and get something in the
Okay.
New York Times, the Washington Post, even a guest opinion thing, an
Sure.
editorial, go to
Okay.
the Op-Ed Project. And that's online, opedproject.org, and they have places where you can submit opinion pieces. And I think that could be another place too, because you obviously have opinions on these things too.
Just a few. Just a few.
Please keep me posted on
I
what
will
happens with
indeed.
everything. And before we go, do you have anything else you want to share?
Nope, I'm just grateful day by day, grateful to be able to write and continue to learn and connect with people, and always surprised about where words and articles take you and when it takes you there, because a lot of times it's never when or what you think, but it's always something.
And thank you for starting our conversation by mentioning my book. Was there something in particular that resonated for you about my book?
Oh, I have many pages that are dog-eared. You know, it kind of just depends on what you're struggling with at the moment. That's what's so good about it, is you've got a lot of different categories and aspects,
Yes.
craft tips to business tips.
And I would just caution one thing with the Substack. I know it's very tempting to write and write and write. Be discerning with it. I don't know how often you're posting right now.
Well, how often do you suggest? How about that?
Well, I want to know, how often are you posting first?
Well, I thought I was going to post once a week, but once every 2 weeks feels better.
I would do once every 2 weeks or once a month even. I wouldn't overdo it at this point. Substack is kind of a world in its own. It's fun and definitely it's giving you that outlet, but I want you to take that outlet on an even bigger stage, and then you'll be able to bring it back to Substack saying, these were my experiences writing about this, or this was a, so that's what I want to kind of see you do.
Okay. All right. That's very helpful. So more voice in my reported pieces, use Substack with discernment to help build a platform, and keep writing.
Yes. And keep writing. That's great, Lanier. I can't wait to see what you're going to be doing next, and you'll share that with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Follow me at EstelleSErasmus.com on my website and on social media, which is Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at Estelle S. Erasmus. And we're now on YouTube for Freelance Writing Direct. Follow along, and soon everyone will be reading what you're writing.